Boruto is about to unlock Future Sight, but it's going to be completely different than Kashin Koji's prescience, and the reasons involved make too much sense. The ability of 10 directions that Koji uses is a technique which he named himself, meaning it could be referred to as something different in the otsutsuki world, just not prescience. The word prescience itself means before knowledge, which means an otsutsuki who unlocks this Shinjutsu would have the knowledge of every event before it actually happens. But looking at how there is another ability unlocked by Eida, which is confirmed to be called Omnipotence. What if this ability that Koji calls prescience is just his own interpretation of the actual divine technique, which in this case could be omniscience, the same ability that Boruto will soon be unlocking through his Jougan. And to understand why I believe so, we will need to gather every character in the story who possesses a moon eye, and that brings us to the lunar trio, Eida, Daemon and Boruto himself. So the idea goes something like this. Eida uses the power of omnipotence, which makes her crescent-shaped eyes gleam. This detail may be intentional, meaning the powers of an otsutsuki god use moon as their signature symbol. Now when we take omnipotence in regard of the Christian theology, where a divine being usually has two other characteristics, which are omniscience and omnipresence, I think these two attributes perfectly match the powers of Daemon as well as Boruto's Jougan, and here is why. Daemon's reflection technique reflects every attack thrown at him, and judging by how it's based off a computer program of the same name, it's a no-brainer that this ability works in the background at all times, protecting Daemon from sudden attacks. Now there are some tiers to this ability which make it more complex yet intriguing. First off, we have intent reflection. Daemon can reflect harmful intentions or killing intent directed at him, regardless of whether he is touching someone. This means that merely thinking about harming Daemon can trigger the reflection, causing the attacker to suffer the intended harm themselves. The stronger the intent, the more severe the reflection. Like imagining a fatal attack may result in the attacker receiving the exact injury. This aspect of his ability is passive and does not need physical contact. It has been described as a form of causality manipulation, where the intended outcome of an attack is redirected to the attacker, bypassing the need for the attack to be physically executed. Then we have action reflection. For Daemon to reflect physical attacks like punches, ninjutsu or weapons, he must touch someone with his palms, which was confirmed by Bug and shown during his contact with Cold or Eida in a battle. If he reflects an attack without clear contact, it may be due to some off-panel contact where he would have briefly touched someone which wasn't visibly shown, or it could even be an intent-based trigger where a strong killing intent might activate the reflection before impact. If not even that, then maybe the manga has purposefully remained vague on this topic, hinting at deeper powers or future reveals beyond the touch rule. Now here is how I think it connects with the omnipresence thing. In Christian theology, omnipresence is the divine attribute of God being fully present everywhere at all times, transcending spatial and temporal limitations. Both Daemon's reflection ability and God's omnipresence exhibit a transcendence of conventional limitations. Daemon's ability to reflect harmful intent operates without spatial or temporal delay, instantly affecting anyone who thinks of harming him, regardless of their location or the attack's execution. Similarly, God's omnipresence allows him to perceive and respond to all thoughts, actions, and events across creation simultaneously, without being bound by physical presence or distance. Daemon's intent reflection also mirrors the theological idea that God is aware of all human intentions, and it gets much crazier when you realize that this ability was possessed by an otsutsuki god in the story, meaning what Daemon uses as a power to reflect everything is actually a watered down version of Shibai Otsutsuki's omnipresence. Now here is where it gets more interesting. Just like as I mentioned earlier, the names given to the Shinjutsu by humans are not actually their real names. When Kashin Koji referred to the future sight as prescience, he must have no knowledge of what this ability is called. Similarly, when Amado attributed the power of Daemon as reflection, it didn't mean that it was actually or officially called that. Remember when everyone mistook Eida's omnipotence as love charm just because it attracted people around her? It's basically the same thing repeating itself. So Kashin Koji's prescience could actually be omniscience that he ain't able to use properly, and Daemon's reflection could be a glimpse of Shibai's ultimate omnipresence. Now here is where the retelling of the original plot comes into play. The reason I believe Boruto will unlock the true omniscience is because it reflects the journey of Jiraiya and Naruto. But before going there have been other hints of Boruto unlocking future sight in the story that I believe are worth mentioning. First off, it was the time when Momoshiki gave him the blue eyes prophecy and told him that even though he has inherited otsutsuki powers, he is still inexperienced and cannot foresee his own future. It went on with Momoshiki saying that he can see his destiny pretty clearly, followed by revealing how some blue eyes would take everything away from him. So the otsutsuki powers of Boruto can lead him to unlocking the future sight is what Momoshiki was trying to emphasize here. The only time when we saw Boruto using a pure otsutsuki power was his battle with Kawaki from the future. If you look at his expressions and behavior in this battle, it feels like he already knew this point was about to come, on top of how this battle will supposedly end. And this foreknowledge won't be something that Koji would pass down to him. Instead, it could be his own Jougan telling him various possibilities and outcomes that he's about to face. I firmly believe that Kashin Koji would not survive the plot till we reach this point in the story, and here is why. First off, he has the most overpowered ability in the show as of now, and there are literally not one but multiple people who want him gone. From Jura to Kawaki, everyone sees him as a liability, and while Kawaki hasn't directly said anything in regard of killing Koji, but I feel like he definitely would, since he is the partner of Boruto, whom he needs to get eliminated. If Koji keeps helping Boruto, it would be hard for Kawaki to kill him, and that may be why he would plan to do something about Koji once the right time comes. We know the Shinju or someone like Code would sooner or later invade the hideout of Koji, just as we saw in his visions, which may be why Inojin can be seen at his place in one of the futures from Prescience. But let's be real here, there is more chance for Kawaki to kill Koji than the Shinju, and the lore goes really deep here, so let me break it down in the best way possible. It would also explain how Boruto would finally gain the power of omnipotence through the Jougan, so I hope you pay some attention. I think the death of Kashin Koji has already been foreshadowed back when he was fighting Ishiki. The Otsutsuki said that all genes are predestined, meaning just because he was made of Jiraiya's DNA, he is destined to die in a similar manner. We know Pain used his rods to kill Jiraiya, and Ishiki was about to kill him in a similar manner, but he somehow escaped and managed to survive. However, the twist comes when you realize it's not only Ishiki who could give him a similar death to Jiraiya by piercing rods into his body and throwing him in some lake or river. We also have Kawaki who can manifest these chakra rods at will to get rid of Kashin Koji, giving him a death similar to Jiraiya as prophesied by Ishiki. But here is how it gets crazier, and if it was actually intended by the writers, then I don't know what to say. It's peak writing for real. When Ishiki talked about all genes are predestined, the writers were not just emphasizing on Jiraiya and Koji here. Instead, the main spotlight of this statement was Ishiki himself. Just because his DNA now resides within Kawaki, since his body was otsutsukified with those experiments, we can expect him to complete what Ishiki had left unfinished simply because all genes are predestined. So Ishiki's destiny is now being followed by Kawaki, and the killing of Kashin Koji is not the only event that would justify it. The annihilation of the shinobi world is also something that he would have done after being resurrected, and the simple fact that Kawaki in the future has literally done that makes it clear that this gene destiny plot will keep coming back in the story, like a hidden foreshadowing that no one was able to get. So now that we know who could potentially be the killer of Kashin Koji, it's time to understand why Boruto would most likely awaken the Jougan as well as the omniscience immediately after the death of his secret ally. I think we are witnessing a retelling of Jiraiya and Naruto's tale in a pretty unique way. The most vital point to note is that Jiraiya never fully mastered Sage Mode because he couldn't perfectly balance nature energy with his own chakra. As a result, when he entered Sage Mode, his appearance partially transformed into a toad, and he required some help from the Toad Elders, Fukasaku and Shima, to gather nature energy for him during battle. This imperfect control made his Sage Mode unstable and slower to use in combat. In contrast, when it comes to Naruto, he mastered Sage Mode after Jiraiya's death through intense training at Mount Myoboku. We can say it was the passing of his mentor which pushed him to those limits. But when it comes to Kashin Koji and Boruto, the case could be a bit symbolic in nature. I think the power of prescience would be passed down to Boruto after he would lose all his hope once Kashin Koji ends up dying. Maybe he would himself pass down the Shinjutsu to him, or it could be a natural awakening which was written in that way. Just like how Naruto only got to master the Sage Mode once Jiraiya died, it could be similar for Boruto with the Star of Hope only awakening once he loses all the other hope. And the only source of hope for him in this scenario was Kashin Koji, who used to help him by constantly looking into the future to find the best way possible out of any situation. His death should have technically driven Boruto hopeless, but that may be the time when he would unlock the Shinjutsu of Future Sight himself, and this time it won't be the prescience, it could be the actual divine power, the omniscience. I think this is also one of the reasons behind the silence of Momoshiki. He doesn't want to reveal how broken the Shinjutsu of Kashin Koji actually is, on top of the real name of this ability. But once Boruto himself unlocks this power, it would be easier for him to understand the ins and outs of it, maybe far better than Kashin Koji, since he wasn't an otsutsuki to begin with, which is why it was naturally harder for him to get used to this power. Boruto, on the other hand, with his otsutsuki experience, or let's say the aid of Momoshiki, could likely have a better control of the Shinjutsu, meaning he would be able to not just attain the power of Eida's Senringan, which is to look around in the world in real time, but also the knowledge of the past, present and future all at once, and that could be the true nature of omniscience. So now let's understand why Boruto could have used the power of omniscience before this fight and how it could move the story forward. We have already seen how Kashin Koji runs the prescience to check through the futures one after another and then pass down the knowledge or plans to Boruto. It's not a rapid process. It takes time and can't be used in battles, as the opponent would finish him by the time he finishes processing this ability. Omniscience, or let's say the true 10 directions, could be completely different in this case. Boruto could simply activate the Jougan and get a montage of the possible events instantly. He could then act on the knowledge without wasting a second to get the most desirable outcome in no time. Assuming if Boruto had omniscience, he would know all of Kawaki's moves, strategies and even thoughts. He could counter every attack, set traps based on future actions, and use past knowledge to exploit weaknesses. A complete barrage of pre-planned moves and events that would help him gain an ultimate edge in not just battles but tricky scenarios as well. I think there must be a reason why Koji has been referred to as the Star of Change, while Boruto gets attributed as the Star of Hope. He must be the anchor which would change the destiny of Boruto once for all, taking him to the point where he attains the ultimate Star of Hope, a power that will help him handle Kawaki and all the threats beyond. Originally it was meant for Koji to have omniscience, which would have perfectly lined up with the omnipotence, omnipresence and omniscience narrative, with Eida and Daemon being the other cyborgs possessing godly prowess. But since it's a no-brainer for Koji to sooner or later die before even gaining the master control of his Shinjutsu, it might pave a way for Boruto to finally unlock the power that Shibai had written for him. Not to mention, Jura already teased that Shibai protecting Boruto, so maybe all of it is a part of a greater cosmic plan that would involve more Otsutsukis as well. Like there must be a reason for Eida and Daemon, the two most powerful cyborgs, to not have a prominent role in the story for over 24 chapters. Eida has been reduced to Koji's assistant, but I think her role as a singularity of fate would somehow pay off in one way or another. Daemon, on the other hand, the most powerful cyborg, could also have a sharp role in the future, and I'm not talking about defeating Mamushi and protecting his sister. It could be something way more grand that would involve his role as the wielder of an Otsutsuki god's power. Even the official Naruto website revealed that he had sensed potential in Himawari back in chapter 77, even before it was revealed that Kurama has reborn inside her. So maybe there is more to the power of an Otsutsuki god that these cyborgs have been using, and if you have any theories on it, I would love to read them in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to never miss another video, and I will see you next time.